The summer of 1998 was unusually warm in the quiet town of Maple Hollow, the kind of town where doors were left unlocked and neighbors knew each other's birthdays. On the afternoon of June 14, 9-year-old Lily Thompson left school with a bounce in her step. She had just won a gold star on her math test and was eager to show her mom. Wearing a purple backpack and a smile that made strangers smile back, she waved goodbye to her friends and took the familiar shortcut home, a narrow path through the woods just behind the playground. She never made it. At first, no one panicked. Kids wandered or stopped to play, and Lily was known to dawdle near the creek looking for frogs. But by dinner time, her mother grew anxious. Calls were made to neighbors, then to her teacher, then finally to the police. A search party was organized that night. Dozens of flashlights sliced through the darkness as volunteers and officers combed the woods. They found her backpack near a mossy tree, one strap torn, but no other signs. No blood, no footprints, no Lily. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. By morning, the media had arrived. The local news showed footage of tearful parents, posters taped to storefront windows, and police officers drawing maps on hoods of patrol cars. Helicopters scanned the forest while scent dogs were brought in. Still, nothing. She had vanished, as if the earth itself had swallowed her. Her disappearance tore through the community. Parents grew fearful. Children were no longer allowed to walk to school alone. The forest path was blocked off with yellow tape and warning signs. Whispers of abduction filled the air, and suspicion began to infect even the most innocent glances between neighbors. Lily's mother, Clara, became a ghost of herself. She refused to sleep in her bedroom, choosing instead to wait by the front door each night, just in case her daughter came home. Her father, Mark, once the town's high school football coach, resigned quietly and rarely spoke in public again. The town held vigils, lit candles, prayed. But nothing changed. By the end of summer, the search dwindled. The cameras left. Investigators rotated out. But Lily's name remained etched into the town's memory, a name spoken with sorrow, with fear, and worst of all, with no answers. The Thompson home, once filled with laughter and warmth, had grown cold and still in the weeks after Lily's disappearance. The kitchen, where her mother once packed lunches with sticky notes and smiley faces, was now quiet, no breakfast chatter, no hurried steps before the school bell. Dust began to settle in places that once bustled with morning routine. Lily's cereal box sat untouched on the counter, expired but unmoved, like a marker of time frozen. Clara Thompson, Lily's mother, hadn't stepped foot in her daughter's room since that day. She would pause outside the door every evening, her hand hovering over the doorknob, but never quite turning it. Through the crack, she could still see the unicorn posters Lily had carefully taped to the walls, the tiny stuffed animals lined along the headboard, the pink curtains she had insisted on picking out herself. Everything remained exactly as Lily had left it. The bed was still slightly unmade, as it always was when she rushed out in the mornings. A library book sat open on the nightstand, halfway through a story about a girl who found a secret garden. Clara's grief hardened into obsession. She spent hours rewatching home videos, listening for something, anything, she might have missed. A face in the background, a strange car passing by. She would call the police department weekly, even when there were no updates. Her voice grew brittle from repeating the same question, "Have you found anything?" Mark Thompson, on the other hand, withdrew into silence. He stopped shaving, stopped smiling. His once proud posture slouched as if the weight of loss bent his spine. Every time he passed Lily's bicycle still leaning against the garage wall, untouched, he looked away. He no longer coached. He barely left the house. In the evenings, he sat on the porch, staring at the edge of the woods, a bottle in one hand, her last drawing in the other, a crayon sketch of their family holding hands under a sun with a big smiling face. They had been a happy family. Now, they were two shadows in a house full of echoes. Clara and Mark began to speak less, not out of anger, but because there was too much pain in every word. Every conversation circled back to what they had lost. On the rare occasions they tried to connect, it was either to argue about what could have been done differently or to break down in each other's arms, sobbing like children who couldn't find their way home. Friends stopped visiting. Neighbors didn't know what to say. Eventually, the casseroles and condolences stopped coming. Time kept moving, but for the Thompsons, the clock had broken the day Lily vanished. And yet, They clung to hope, not because it was easy, but because letting go felt like betraying their daughter. Even in silence, even in suffering, the question never stopped burning in their hearts. Where was Lily? 3 years after Lily's disappearance, the case had long gone cold. The bright pink flyers with her face that once papered the town were now faded and torn, peeling off bulletin boards or covered by newer posters. Her name, once spoken daily on the news and whispered in every grocery aisle, had been replaced by newer tragedies, fresher scandals. Maple Hollow had moved on, at least on the surface. But in the evidence room of the county sheriff's office, Lily's case file still sat on the bottom shelf of a dusty cabinet marked, unsolved. Hundreds of pages, witness statements, maps, search logs, interview transcripts, had piled up. Her pink backpack, carefully preserved in a sealed bag, sat alone in a box beside a pair of worn sneakers and a page from her journal. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle no one could finish. Enter Detective Noah Harris, recently transferred from the city. He was younger than most of the senior officers, known for his persistence and a sharp memory that caught things others overlooked. Harris had heard whispers about the Lily Thompson case, a missing girl with no leads, no suspects, and no closure. Something about it struck him. He pulled the file out one night after hours, not expecting much. But the more he read, the more unsettled he became. Too many small things didn't add up. Why had the dogs lost her scent so quickly near the edge of the woods? Why had a neighbor's odd statement about a van parked too long on the corner been dismissed so casually? Why had no one revisited the maintenance worker who quit the day after her disappearance? Harris spent nights alone in the evidence room, laying photos across the floor, rereading the same interviews again and again. He built a new timeline. He drove the route she would have walked that day, timing it to the minute. He mapped every single sighting reported within the first 48 hours. A pattern began to emerge, not a clear one, but enough to stir something in his gut. He spoke with Clara and Mark Thompson, now barely speaking to each other, each lost in their own grief. Clara was hesitant, worn down from years of disappointment. "You're not the first to reopen the case," she said bitterly. "And you probably won't be the last." But Harris' quiet determination softened her. He didn't make promises. He didn't dramatize. He just said, "I believe there's something we missed." And he did. One night, while reviewing photos of items recovered near Lily's backpack, Harris noticed something odd. A small drawing tucked into the edge of a notebook, dismissed as scribbles. But Harris saw it differently. It wasn't just doodles. It was a map. A child's map. With new eyes, Harris began tracing it. And suddenly, the trail that had once gone cold didn't seem so cold after all. It was the morning of June 14th, exactly 3 years to the day since Lily disappeared. The sky was gray, the kind of heavy overcast that seemed to reflect the weight in Clara Thompson's heart. Every anniversary was hard, but this one felt especially cruel. 3 years without answers, without closure, without her daughter. She woke up early, as she always did on this day, lit the same lavender candle in Lily's room, and sat on the edge of the bed that hadn't been touched since 1998. Around 10 a.m., Clara opened the front door to find a small, unmarked envelope lying on the porch. There was no postage, no return address, just her name written in a childlike scrawl. Her breath caught. She stood there for a full minute, staring at it as if it might vanish. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It felt oddly warm, as though it had just been placed there. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper. Old, crinkled, but preserved. It was a drawing, unmistakably a child's. A girl with blonde hair standing under a sun with long rays. She wore a purple backpack. Next to her was a small house with a tree, and a dog. The lines were shaky, the coloring uneven. But the signature at the bottom chilled Clara to her bones. L. Just the letter. The way Lily had always signed her schoolwork. Clara staggered back into the house, clutching the drawing to her chest. She could barely breathe. Her heart pounded as she picked up the phone and called the police, her voice cracking, barely coherent. Within the hour, Detective Harris arrived with 2 officers. He asked to see the envelope and the drawing, gently placing them into evidence bags with gloved hands, but not before taking a photo for his own records. He studied the drawing in silence. "This isn't just a memory," he said quietly. "It was made recently. The paper's not 3 years old. The pencil marks are fresh. Whoever gave this to you, they knew Lily. Maybe she's still. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The drawing reignited the investigation. For the first time in years, the station buzzed with energy. Forensics began testing the paper for prints and fibers. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen someone approach the house. A neighbor mentioned spotting a figure near the porch early that morning, too far away to identify, but moving quickly and wearing a hood. Clara sat in the living room, staring at the framed photo of Lily on the mantel. She whispered, over and over, "You're alive. I know you're alive." The hope that had nearly withered away came roaring back. And for Detective Harris, the drawing wasn't just a clue, it was a message. A breadcrumb. A sign that Lily, or someone close to her, wanted to be found. Detective Harris sat alone in his office late into the night, the child's drawing pinned to the wall beside maps, photos, and timelines. The drawing wasn't random. It held meaning, symbols. The tree, the house, the crooked fence. Every stroke felt intentional, a coded message from a frightened little girl who couldn't speak openly. Harris stared at the sun in the picture, a strange spiral instead of rays. He'd seen something like that before. Then it clicked. 3 counties over, there had once been an abandoned cabin near an old tree farm, long since shut down after a fire in 1994. Aerial photographs of the area revealed a crooked wooden fence, just like in the picture. Harris dug into the land records and found that the property was never fully demolished. The cabin still stood, decaying and forgotten, deep in the woods off a gravel road that didn't appear on GPS. He didn't wait for a warrant. By morning, Harris and 2 deputies were in a black SUV bumping down the overgrown path that led to the property. Weeds clawed at the vehicle. The trees grew thick, blocking out the sun. When the cabin came into view, it was worse than they'd imagined: sagging porch, shattered windows, roof half collapsed. It looked like no one had stepped inside for decades. But someone had. Fresh footprints, smaller than an adult's, led up to the door. Harris' heart raced. They moved slowly, weapons drawn. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, rot, and something else, something human. Toys were scattered on the floor. A blanket was bunched in the corner. A faded journal with torn pages lay open on a crate that had been used as a table. One of the deputies called out, "Sir, over here." In the back room, behind a flimsy curtain, they found remnants of a child's world. An old mattress with worn sheets, a collection of colored pencils in a tin, and several pieces of folded paper tucked under a floorboard. They were drawings, just like the one Clara had received. All signed with the same simple letter, L. There was no sign of Lily, but Harris knew. She had been here. For a long time. He crouched by the journal. The handwriting was unmistakable, a child's. The entries were haunting in their innocence. He says, "I'm safe here but I can't go outside. The dog is nice but it's not mine. I miss mommy." Then, a name, scribbled once, then scratched out. Mr. D. Harris' hands clenched. Someone had kept her hidden. Someone had told her lies. And someone had been close enough to drop a drawing at Clara's doorstep without being seen. As the team processed the scene, bagging every item and marking the floorboards for forensic testing, Harris stepped outside and looked up at the trees. The forest had kept its secret for too long. But now the silence was broken. The cabin had spoken. And Lily, somewhere, might still be waiting. The journal taken from the abandoned cabin was fragile, its pages yellowed and smudged with dirt, some stuck together by water damage or time. But the words, written in a small, uneven scrawl, were clear enough to chill even the most seasoned investigators. Detective Harris sat alone in the evidence room, reading through the entries by the dim light of a desk lamp. Each line peeled back a layer of Lily's captivity, each sentence a whisper from the past. The first few pages were innocent, almost hopeful. Greater than, "This place is quiet. He says it's my new home. He brought me juice and crackers. There's a dog here. I call him Henry. I think he's old. He doesn't bark much." But soon the tone shifted. Greater than, "I don't like it when he locks the door from outside. He says mommy's too sad to see me right now. I think that's a lie. I'm not allowed to talk loud. Only whisper. Even when I'm scared." One page had a drawing of the same cabin, stick figures inside, one big, one small, and bars over the windows. In the corner, a black scribble with the word, "Hide," written in capital letters, over and over again. The entries continued for months. Dates were inconsistent, but the emotional deterioration was evident. Greater than, I had a birthday. He brought me a cupcake. No candle. No singing. He says I can go outside when I'm good. But he never lets me. Sometimes I write letters to mommy but he takes them away. But then came the entry that made Harris stop cold. Greater than, I left one in the mailbox anyway. I hope someone finds it. His eyes darted to the envelope that had arrived at Clara's home weeks earlier. Had that been one of the letters she snuck out? Had she found a way, even in captivity, to reach the outside world? Then came the final pages. Short, uncertain, some with only one line. Greater than, I had a dream I was home. He's gone a lot now. I don't know why. I heard voices near the trees. And finally, greater than, if someone finds this, tell them I tried to be brave. That last page had a small tear in the corner, as if she'd clutched it too tightly before hiding the book. Harris sat back in his chair, the weight of what he had just read pressing down on him. Lily hadn't just vanished, she had endured. Alone, confused, lied to. He could only imagine the fear she must have lived with every day, the isolation, the aching need to believe someone was still looking for her. He sent the journal off for handwriting verification and DNA analysis. It came back quickly. The writing matched Lily's schoolwork samples. The pages contained strands of her hair, confirming she had lived in that cabin for an extended time. But the most pressing question now was, if she had been there, where had she gone? The cabin showed signs of recent activity, a cracked mug, a food wrapper dated only a few months prior, footprints not yet faded. It was possible she had escaped. Or been moved. Either way, the journal proved something vital. Lily hadn't died 3 years ago. She had been alive, and perhaps still was. And now, the hunt wasn't just about finding out what happened to her. It was about finding her before the trail went cold again. Detective Harris paced the floor of his office, the weight of urgency pressing harder with every passing hour. The journal had made it clear, Lily had survived for years in that cabin. But what troubled him now was the uncertainty of her present. She might have escaped, or been taken again. Either way, she was no longer at the cabin, and whoever had been holding her hadn't vanished into thin air. Harris went back to the interview logs from 1998. A particular name resurfaced, Daniel Rowe. He'd been a quiet, middle-aged maintenance worker at Lily's school. Unmarried, no children, rarely spoke to anyone. He had volunteered briefly during the early search, then disappeared from the area shortly after Lily's case went cold. His record was clean, but something had always felt off. His alibi at the time had been thin. I was home alone, watching TV. No one had confirmed it. And back then, the cabin hadn't even been on the police's radar. Harris ran a current address check. Daniel had recently resurfaced 2 counties away, living under the radar in a rundown trailer park near a state highway. It was the first real lead in years. With backup in place, Harris and 2 officers headed out before dawn, parking a block away and approaching the trailer on foot. The place was as eerie as it was silent, weathered siding, boarded windows, and a strange stack of children's books beside the trash bin. Harris' gut twisted. They knocked. No answer. But as they turned to leave, they heard a shuffle inside. Then, a bolt being slid. Slowly, the door creaked open, and there stood Daniel Rowe. He looked thinner than in the old photos. Gaunt, pale, and immediately nervous. Daniel Rowe, Harris asked, flashing his badge. Yeah, what's this about? We'd like to ask you some questions. About Lily Thompson. The name alone drained the color from his face. Rowe stammered, that was years ago. I don't know anything. But his hands were shaking. Inside the trailer, things were even more telling. A quick sweep revealed troubling items, hair clips in a drawer, a pink shoelace in a box, and what looked like a crude scrapbook filled with clippings about Lily's disappearance. It wasn't just evidence. It was obsession. Harris had him in custody within minutes. At the station, under bright interrogation lights, Rowe initially stayed silent. But as the pressure mounted, the journal, the drawings, the items from the cabin, cracks appeared in his resolve. He denied hurting Lily but admitted to keeping her safe from the world. A twisted logic. He confessed to finding her near the creek that day, scared and alone. He said he'd taken her to the cabin to protect her from sadness, a delusion built over years of isolation and madness. But then came the crucial detail. She's not with me anymore, he muttered. She left, maybe 6 months ago. Said she was going to find her mom. Harris' heart jumped. Where did she go? Rose shrugged helplessly. Said she had a plan. Left me a note, but I burned it. I thought she'd come back. The interrogation room fell into silence. Harris stood, fists clenched at his sides. Lily had gotten away. She had made it out. And now, more than ever, time was everything. The search intensified like never before. Every officer in the department was briefed. Media outlets picked up the story again. Breaking. New clues emerge in 3-year-old disappearance of Lily Thompson. The town, once lulled into believing Lily was gone forever, erupted with cautious hope. Old flyers were replaced with new ones bearing age-progressed images of what Lily might look like now, 3 years older, more mature, but with those same piercing eyes that had haunted her mother's dreams. Detective Harris didn't sleep. The moment Daniel Rowe admitted Lily had escaped, he began mapping all known bus routes, train stations, and shelters within a 200-mile radius. If Lily had run on foot, she would have needed food, safety, rest, and possibly help. He sent photos and alerts to every hospital, youth shelter, church outreach program, and missing persons advocate in the region. Then, a break, small, but real. A nurse at a women's shelter on the outskirts of Cedarville called in. A girl matching Lily's description had appeared 2 weeks earlier. She didn't give her name, just said she was looking for her mother. The girl was withdrawn, quiet, slept curled up with a stuffed bear and kept to herself. She left the next morning before staff could get any ID, but the nurse had kept the drawings she left behind, a house under a yellow sun, with "Mom" written in the sky. It matched the style from the cabin drawings. Harris drove to the shelter himself. Holding the drawing in his hands, he knew Lily had been there. He asked to see any security footage. The grainy video showed her entering the building just before midnight, wearing oversized clothes, her blonde hair longer and messier, but her eyes unmistakable. She looked older, more guarded. Yet when she glanced at the receptionist and smiled briefly, it pierced Harris' heart. She was surviving. From that shelter, Harris traced a pattern. A second sighting at a diner just outside town. A waitress remembered the girl because she'd asked for a napkin and drew on it while waiting. The napkin had a dog, a tree, and a woman with brown hair. The woman, she told the waitress, was my mom, but I don't know where she lives. The pieces were coming together, but it was like chasing a shadow. Every time they got close, she had already moved on. Still, Harris kept going, following every thread, checking every shelter and station, asking every witness who might have seen a girl alone, afraid, yet determined. Then, a miracle. Clara Thompson got a letter in the mail, no return address but the same handwriting. The same childlike scrawl. Inside was a simple message. Greater than, I'm trying to find you. I'm almost there. I remember your eyes. There was no signature, but none was needed. Clara collapsed into tears, clutching the letter like a lifeline. Harris rushed to her home, examining the envelope and its postmark. It had been mailed from a city just 40 miles away. He called in every favor he had, asking patrol officers to keep their eyes open. Flyers were posted again. And then, the moment came. 2 days later, in a public library near the postmark location, a librarian called the tip line. There's a girl here. She matches the photo. She's been reading alone for hours. Harris raced there with Clara. They entered the library quietly. The librarian pointed to a corner. And there she was. Older, thinner, her face tired, but it was her. Lily. She looked up at the sound of footsteps. Her eyes locked on Clara. A moment of hesitation, and then, she whispered, "Mom." Clara broke down. They rushed to each other, sobbing, clinging, the world blurring around them. Harris turned away, overwhelmed by the quiet weight of the moment. After 3 years of pain, silence, and hope, Lily Thompson had come home.